What people don't understand is that coffee doesn't give you energy, it blocks the sleepy signal. And so if you wake up in the morning and you haven't had deep, slow wave sleep, you feel like crap. But it could be you're just walking around with a really dirty brain and you don't even know it. And you think it's everyone else. You think it's you, it's him, it's her. When people say to me, I feel unhinged, I feel awful, I feel out of sorts, I'm like, go and have a good, hearty sleep. Once you do that, all the good things happen.
If you walked into an average Aussie bedroom, what are a few of the things from an environment point of view that can help us get a better night's sleep?
The room should be dark, cold and quiet. So if you hold your hand out in front of your face and you can still see your hand, your room's not dark enough. People will often try and wake up in that light sleep so they can get creative insights. They will deliberately get themselves into that light sleep. And that's the way that you can access your deep consciousness and not be constrained by the laws of physics or the laws of social appropriateness.
When should we stop drinking coffee? What are some foods that we should look to avoid if we want to sleep well? How long before we go to bed we should stop eating?
Yeah, these are excellent questions. So just to go back to the caffeine, coffee is really, really good. And I think what people don't understand is that...
Hey legend, just quickly before today's episode, let me tell you about the Good Human Factory. About 6 years ago now, I created the Good Human Factory to teach people the simple skills they can practice every day to better manage their mental health. Over the past 6 years, I've designed and delivered workshops to over 75,000 participants, and the feedback is incredible. 99% of participants at our workshops would recommend it to a friend, and 98% say they're going to use the skills we taught them moving forward. So if you're looking for a workshop in your workplace, sporting club, school community, or just your community group, then head to thegoodhumanfactory.com. We have a brand new website where you can learn all about the workshops. You can inquire to see if it's a perfect fit for you. You can also book a free 15-minute discovery call with me to learn if our workshop is right for your organization. The time is done for just a pizza lunch for your workplace. If you want an engaging speaker who's going to leave your staff with positive takeaways, then make sure you head to thegoodhumanfactory.com. It's been so incredible. So many people who listen to this podcast have recommended to their workplace, and we've come in and given such a great session. So if you want to learn more about it, you can head to the show notes, find our website, and see if the workshop's perfect for you. Also, the last thing you can do to help us out is whatever platform you're listening to right now, hit the like, hit the subscribe. It makes sure you're going to get the next episode right when it comes out. Let's jump into today's episode. My guest today is Dr. Jemma King. She's a sleep expert with a PhD in human behaviour, specialising in emotional intelligence and performance under stress. She's a research fellow at the University of Queensland School of Psychology. Gemma's consulted to the Australian Defence Force, Special Operations Command, the Australian Olympic Swim Team, and the Australian Institute of Sport, and even built a performance optimization program for our special forces based on emotional intelligence principles. She's also a mum of 3 teenagers who's lived through the sleep deprivation trenches herself, and her new book is called Sleep First, Sleep Smarter, Think Sharper, and Feel Better, which is out now through Wiley Publishing, the same publisher who did my book. So please welcome Dr. Jemma King. How you doing, Dr. Jemma?
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's so important, the work that you do. Sleep is absolutely the foundation of so much. And with the work that I do, I kind of explained a little bit to you before writing my book and doing so many of these interviews. Sleep is just one of the, I think, most overlooked but most vital things in our life. But what I always open Good Humans podcast with is, what are you grateful for today in your life?
Well, so many things, but really it's been put in my face recently doing this book launch. Just what an amazing bunch of friends and family that I've got. So, it's really awkward to ask people, come to my book launch or can you read my book? And like my family and my friends have just like piled in and turned up and just sending me incredible messages and doing reviews and handing out my books to people. And so, yeah, I just kind of reminded just how lucky I am because there's so many people out there. And I think this is, when you're talking about mental health, I think this is a really big factor with mental health is loneliness and feeling disconnected and not feeling like you've got a tribe or someone to turn to. And there's so many people in the younger generations who report, I just don't have anyone to turn to. So I'm deeply, deeply grateful for my partner, my kids, my mum, and all my extended family and my mates.
That's so awesome. Thanks for sharing that. It's yeah, it's an interesting thing when you're launching a book, right? You kind of like
Right.
need to lean on people and it feels a bit awkward. I saw
All
you had
good.
a Dimmicks George Street launch last week, maybe, or over the weekend actually. I saw
Yeah,
you had it.
Monday.
How cool is that store in Dimmicks in Sydney? I did one there as well. It's such a epic, like multi-story bookstore.
Yeah, it's good, and my gorgeous, cousin Alex was, like, running up to people going, "You hey, how do you sleep? You should buy this book," and I was kind of embarrassed, but she was so awesome, so I was like, yeah, it's good, all good fun.
That's so good. And then, like you'd mentioned, that quality of connection we have with people around us is literally the foundation, as well as sleep, of life. You know, there's that Harvard study, that longitudinal study that showed the biggest predictor of our quality of life is the quality of our connections. I'm going to already sidetrack because I know we're going to sidetrack a lot.
But it's interesting, it's not like the tight connections, it was the loose connections, so who you buy your coffee off, like, going to the bakery and saying hi, like, those kinda loose connections were really important, which I found really interesting.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating, right? It's like we've got
It's a
more
village.
connections than ever on social media, like you mentioned, young people, but we're losing that depth. We're losing that eye
Mm,
contact. We're losing the connection that is more than, oh, if someone follows me on Instagram. It's like, oh no, somebody's asked me how my day was or smiled at me or had eye connection. Like all these
yeah,
things matter and we're kind of losing that, I feel.
100%, yeah.
The second question I always open with before we, work through your story and get to some incredible information about sleep for our audience is if you could only spend 14 minutes a day doing something for your mental health based on all the incredible knowledge that you have. I told you before we started that my book's called The 1% Good Club, all about starting with at least 14 minutes for your mental health, 1% of your day. If you were only given 14 minutes, what would you do for your biggest return on investment for your mental health?
For a start, what a brilliant concept, like, everyone can do something for 14 minutes.
Mm,
I love that framing. So mine's based on fun and science. So mine would be dancing. Dancing with
interesting.
friends, like, and because like, I need no encouragement. I'll dance to a, the noise when you press the thing at the lights. But, there's a paper that's come out, and it's basically looking at all of the things to help with depression, serotonin reuptake inhibitors and, antidepressants, walking, blah, blah, and the one thing that came out on top that statistically significantly was much better than any other activity or drug was dancing. And when you look at it from an evolutionary perspective and what's happening inside our bodies, like, we didn't dance if we were really sad. And so in the act of dancing, you actually trick your primitive brain to think, well, everything must be okay. If you were sad, if you were in danger, if there's something wrong, there's no way you'd be flailing your arms around and being inattentive to danger and you just, get absorbed with the music. You wouldn't do it. So basically dancing is just tricking your brain into thinking that you're happy and you're safe.
I love that. You love my girlfriend. My partner absolutely loves dancing. She's Brazilian, so we're always doing samba
Oh,
and listening to music at home. And we actually went to I love that you bring that up. And this once again comes to this community thing. We went to this like sober dance night a couple months ago where there was like a DJ in the middle and there was like 100 people and everybody was just like expressing themselves so beautifully. And I come from a professional surf, pretty blokey kind of
yeah.
background and I felt so out of place going there. But by the end, you realize that like no one is there to look at or judge anyone else. They're there to just express themselves and let themselves go. And you could just see like the
Yeah.
joy that that brought to so many people. So dancing, I love that. Such a
Yeah,
great
and I think that's so much part of their culture. And anyway, like South Americans, there's little kids, there's old people, and they've got so much rhythm. I'm so jealous of them, yeah, like the way they move. But like when growing up, my mum always used to put on music, and we'd always dance around the house together. And that was something that I did with my kids. And like no matter how, because I got divorced and it was tough. I was like a single mom for a while, and it was often really hard. I was studying and working, and so of a routine every afternoon. I'd put on music and the kids and I would just dance around. And then if I ever came in the house and they were like, "Mum's cranky," and then they would like put on music and do silly dances to try and make me laugh. And my kids are now, they're actually in their early 20s now. And they said, "Mum, this is one thing," especially my son. He goes, "Thank you so much for teaching me how to dance." Because, when he was younger and dating, he'd get on the dance floor and he was like literally the only guy because he's really blokey that would be dancing. So all the girls were like, "Yeah, Jack, you're so cool. You've got the moves." And he was like, "Thanks, mum."
that's so good. Yeah, dancing's such a
Mm.
you learn it at school and you do like I remember at school like doing bits of dancing and then you kind of just like let the judgment of others get the better of you. But people who can dance are so cool. One of my good friends is used to be an actor in Neighbours, but he's like an actor and a dancer in musical theatre. And whenever we're out and a good song comes on, he'll just start dancing, and it's just like so cool. And then as well, like you touched on the Brazilian culture. I went to the Amazon at the end of last year and spoke at the United Nations climate change
Wow.
conference. And we went out one night after, and there was these like oldies. This guy would have been in his 80s, and they turned like a big dance circle around him doing like salsa with like all the different women would come in and dance with this 80-year-old. It was the coolest experience ever. Not great for my
Oh.
sleep. We were up very late and drinking alcohol, but we can have a few passes every
On
now
that
and
on
then for
that
good
thing,
fun.
yeah, honestly, because, loneliness is such an epidemic and it's the new smoking.
Yeah.
I often say you're much better off staying up late, having a laugh, having a drink, having a dance with your friends than sitting at home neurotic. I've got to go to sleep. I've got to be up, let yourself go every now and again. And I always say, do the good things most of the time. So every now and then you can have a blowout and have fun. I'm a big believer. It's so good for the soul.
I agree. It's like progress, not perfection. If you're striving for perfection, you're going to fail and you're going to be disappointed. And
Yeah.
then, as well with like the wellness and health industry nowadays, there's so many little things that you have to do right, and you feel
Like
like
a
you,
religion. Yeah.
yeah, literally. And I've kind of found myself in that trap too. Like in my book, I have like 10 healthy habits that I try and do each day to regulate my nervous system, so I have the best chance to, show up feeling good. But I never get all 10 of them every day, but it's about coming back and having the accountability of, all right, I've done 4 days in a row that I haven't eaten at home. Okay, I better make sure I get back to like
Yeah.
home cooking, or 4 days in a row my water intake's been pretty bad. I better get back to like drinking enough water. So it's about like having it there and then trying to come back to it and not be like strict of like, oh my God, I've stuffed up.
Yeah, and I think that's really a really interesting point that you bring up, that there's so many things and so many people saying, "You've got to do this and do that." And people feel like they're failing in life and making money and relations enough as it is. And then they're like, "Oh my God, I've got all these personal failures as well. So I feel so marginalized or disenfranchised. So you know what? I'm not going to do any of it." And I
Mm,
think, like, I'm really big on not being like this kind of Nazi around wellness and health, because it's tough, particularly if
mm,
you're a parent, particularly if you've got, I don't know, issues, and you just don't wanna have another thing that you fail at. So I'm always a big proponent, like, be gentle with yourself. Be
mm,
okay to not be okay sometimes, and
yeah.
do dumb stuff and do stuff that's bad for you, but just make sure you're laughing while you're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been playing around with this concept a little bit in my head recently of like, I feel like the real meaning to life is like being content with where you're at, but excited about where you're going. And it's like,
Yeah.
you're proud of where you're at, doesn't matter where you've come from, but then you're excited about where you're going. So you've kind of still got that
But how do you
excitement.
make yourself proud of, like, when, so there's probably people out there listening that has never had one person say, "Hey, you know what? You're doing all right," or, "I've got faith in you. You're gonna become something." Like, the amount of people who are told by their parents, their teachers, their work colleagues, like, "You're nothing. You'll amount to nothing." It's actually more common than we think, and you think people are
Mm,
really struggling with these battles, and it's okay to sit there if you've got a great family and people who encourage you and believe in you, but there's a lot of people out there that just don't have that. So how do you make yourself proud of yourself when no one else sees it? That's the $1,000,000 question. 6
that
simple
is
rules.
really, yeah, it is difficult. But then as well, like what you mentioned then, this idea that we expect parents to be good parents, but it happens all the time when I go into schools. They're like, oh, this stuff that you teach is what the parents should teach. But it's like, yeah, but parents don't know about gratitude and mindfulness and kindness and the science of it and how to like model it. Or it's like they tell you what to do, but they don't show you what to do because, they haven't been taught that stuff themselves. So trying to,
You can only give what you've got. That's why I say to my kids, and everyone, I'm like, read as much as you can, just like absorb, just be a voracious reader of biographies and other people's stories, and get your hands on every single thing you can learn from. That's what I did when I was feeling like strung out and unhappy in my life. I just was like, I'm just going to read my way out of this.
I love that. It's a big thing that I talk about when I first really had my perspective and mindset shift. It was when my psychologist said to me, start reading some autobiographies and biographies of people that you look up to and look for the lessons and the mistakes that they made in their life. So then you don't have to make them in yours and try and take from that.
Vicarious learning. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I began to sort of think through this mindset of like, we're all pushed towards entertainment, 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 everywhere around you, marketing, entertainment. But we should be focused on education, inspiration, motivation. And I say to people, when you're doing this education, inspiration, motivation, you're growing through life, you're trending upwards. When you're just stuck on the entertainment train, you're going through life it's okay to go through life a little bit and get sucked into entertainment. I reckon I'm like 70% entertainment, but
Yeah.
try and balance it out with education as well, because that's where you're going to level up and grow through life as well as going through life. So it's trying to have that balance. And yeah,
Particularly now, like when you look at what the younger generation, their future that they're facing, it's just like an AI generated landscape where AIs are better at us in literally everything. So unless you've become an educated generalist where you can actually connect dots from multiple different perspectives and make sense of the world, um, it's really going to be hard for you to be of value in the future because being, I suppose, good at one thing, a deep specialist in, say, you go to uni and you just do engineering, or you're an accountant if you get to uni. Like, deep knowledge on one thing is not going to be important. What's going to make people successful and valuable in the future is having, human dynamic capabilities to understand humans, understand the way people operate, being able to connect the dots. And this takes education. This takes reading broadly. It takes reading, as you said, autobiographies, biographies, and not just watching, entertainment slop, fairy floss for the brain, or just things that kick off your dopamine system because it's a cheap, quick hit. Like, we've got to get smart. We've got to keep valuable.
well, and we just got to keep awareness. Like, we live in a profound time on this planet. Every single person who's listening to this right now has access to a phone or a computer. You can find any bit of information that's ever been published, but it comes back to you. What sort of responsibility are you taking? Are you looking for the things that are entertaining, or are you looking for the things that are educating, inspiring, motivating? And the thing is, all the marketing goes towards the entertaining. So you're fighting an uphill battle, but once you
Yeah,
bring that awareness to it, you go, okay, I can start moving that way. But anyway, we've already gone on a big tangent and haven't gone my normal structure.
I
And I
know.
want to get to know your story a little bit. Let's go back to the start now. You don't have to go so super into it, but you can if you want. But what do I need to know about, I guess, your upbringing, where you came from, what was life like as a kid? Where'd you grow up to understand a bit about Gemma, as a young girl?
So I had a bit of an unusual childhood in the fact that we moved around a lot, and my dad called us corporate nomads. So he would run big hotels and also area manage different hotels from different states. And so we didn't live in a normal house. We lived in a sort of an apartment. We often lived in, like, the biggest apartment in the hotel, or, it was modified. And, so I was always the new kid. I was always having to go into a new school, and it was really hard to come into a new school. Often sometimes we would come mid-year. So not even was at the start of the year where there's other new kids. I was like the new kid. My sister didn't like it very much. She was much more introverted than me, hated it. I was a little bit better, because I'm sort of more extroverted. But, growing up, I loved sport. My mum was just saying to me the other day, which is quite funny, that I was actually quite nonverbal until I was probably about, I don't know, 8? I just didn't talk. I was like a little chimpanzee. I'd just get on the monkey bars and swing around and not really talk to anyone. And I had a best friend, and her name was, we lived in Townsville at this stage, and her name was Winifred Napatari, and she was from the Thursday Islands, and she was as dark as I was white. I was so white. And we were like these best friends on this monkey bars just swinging around, and she'd had some trauma in her life and she didn't talk. So I remember the teacher saying to my mum, "Does Gemma talk to Winifred? Because, like, she never speaks." So, yeah, so it wasn't until I suppose I was, yeah, year 5, I started speaking. We went on a holiday, and we went all through Singapore and up to Malacca, and I got really bad giardia, and they didn't know what it was, and so I lost, like, all my weight. I was kind of like a skeleton, and they called in the priest for the last rites, and they all thought I was going to die. And it was, yeah, pretty bad. And then my grandfather, who's a anaesthetist, sort of said, "Oh, that sounds like Giardia." Got better, but it took me a long time to get over that. I was really sick. Eventually, I went to boarding school, and then I did my last year of school in Canberra. Got glandular fever. Had to repeat my last year of school, and was just really interested in science. And so then when I started doing science at university there, and then so I sort of felt really bored, didn't like Canberra much, but back then Canberra was not the best, most exciting place. And so I thought, I'm going to go overseas. I want to go to Italy. And I think I was just 18. And then I said to mum and dad, I'm going to buy my own ticket to Italy. And the cheapest flight that I could get was an Aeroflot ticket. And if anyone knows back in the day, Aeroflot was the worst airline. It was like the chairs were loose and all the staff were drunk and everyone was smoking on the plane. And
Oh,
so you'd always you'd always get the smoking section so you could lay out. And so I ended up stopover in Moscow on my way to Italy, and I stayed there for 2 years. It's like the
wow.
world's longest stopover. And then when I was there, I was, because I'd grown up in hospitality, I was staying with my friend. Her parents were in the embassy there. She was working at an Irish pub, and the bosses of that Irish pub said, "Do you want to come and work for us with restaurants and nightclubs and supermarkets?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And then so I ended up becoming the manager to this nightclub in Moscow for 2 years, which was crazy because it was, right at the time when Yeltsin was bombing the White House, and there was the last communist uprising, and there was a war on, and so got caught up in all of that. But yeah, it was crazy, crazy, very dangerous time. So I learnt Russian. Also went to Canada, and I went and lived in Korea, and then eventually, after 4 years, my mum got a cancer scare, so I came home. She's fine now, and came back to Australia. Went back to uni, and then eventually got married at 24 and started having babies. So all the while studying. So I had 3 kids. Eventually, after 12 years of marriage, unfortunately broke up, and then embarked on my life as a single mum with 3 kids, studying and working, and then eventually ended up teaching at university in the business school, doing studies. I did lots of different studies, and eventually doing a PhD and finishing that.
Wow.
And
What a crazy journey, right? Living in
yeah,
Russia, being in Korea, like in your early 20s, like or late teens, early 20s, like what a crazy experience to get a bit of world experience as well. I mean, I was very lucky being a professional surfer. I traveled the world from like 15 pretty much by
yeah.
myself and just got to have so many incredible experiences to kind of build perspective on how big the world is. Whereas when you're like insulated in just Australia, like the amount of people, America's even worse for it. The amount of
Oh, yeah.
Americans that don't leave America, I think that that's all there is in the world. But
Yeah.
I always have this view of like Australia, we're like the weird odd ones out. We're only like 0.3% of the global population,
But we
there's a
make
lot
a
more
lot of trouble.
normal than what we think is normal. Like we're so far away from everywhere too. So I feel like traveling is like the university of life. Like you learn so much through experience of, working at a nightclub to having a friend's parent in the embassy to,
Yeah.
traveling like you did would have been, I'm sure you learned not as much maybe as all your studies by traveling, but I'm sure you learned a lot on the travel. But talk to me about your study because you're a human behavior specialist and emotional intelligence. Like, what did you go and study and what did that look like and why?
I literally studied everything under the sun. So I started off doing science, so anatomy, physiology, chemistry, all those science things. Then went away, and so I was wanting to do pre-med to go into medicine. And so then, when I came back, because I could speak Russian, and I was kind of a bit more interested in world politics, so I started just studying Russian at ANU, and then I also was studying economics and politics, and I was just so bad at the Russian. Like, I knew how to swear, I knew how to order butter, and I could speak, gutter Russian, and they were asking, "What's the past participle reflexive tense of this verb?" And I'm like, "What? What?" So I just barely passed that, and then I just sort of didn't like it. Oh, and I also got a modeling contract after that, so then I went off and did that for a bit, and then, I went back to uni, and then I was like, I really I studied medical microbiology and immunology as well, and then I was like, I really love psychology because I was really trying to get into med, but then I thought, "You know what? I'm reading all these psychology books all the time anyway, just for fun," and so then I decided to transfer all of my units and points over to do a psych degree. Then finished the psych degree, then I did honours, and I did the honours at the business school because I was teaching, and so I was teaching organisational behaviour stuff, so there's all the stuff around motivation and teams and leadership and all that kind of stuff, and then I did a PhD and I smooshed all of those 3 things together, so the physiology, the psychology, and, organisational behaviour stuff. So the physiology part was I was looking at how do you measure stress, because I know everyone bullshits when they talk about stress. They either over index. I'm so stressed and catastrophize, or other people will underestimate. They say, "No, I'm fine. I'm not stressed," but they are. So I thought
Mhm.
the best way to measure stress would be an objective measure using cortisol and immune function. And then the emotional intelligence I was really fascinated in the human dynamics, psychology, and just how much emotions will really drive our behavior, our physiology, and our interpersonal dynamics. I think so much of our life starts with our own emotions, and it colors the way in which we see the world. So emotional intelligence became really interesting. And then teaching how to manage stress using emotional intelligence training in high performance environments. And so then I was asked to go and work at the Australian Special Forces doing research with them. And then I did heaps of really cool research, and they were really happy with what I did. So then I was asked to come back and consult and train at Special Forces for a couple of years. So yeah, it was very serendipitous, not planned out. Just I would just like, this looks interesting, this looks cool, this looks fun, and just sort of roll this way, roll that way. So there was nothing ever planned, or like I'm going to do this, or I'm going to be a doctor of human behavior. I want to work with special forces or athletes. It's just all super accidental.
Yeah, it sounds like you could write about 10 different books in a whole different range of categories. I want to read your human behavior book. I want to read your emotional intelligence book. So why sleep? Is this your first book? It's called Sleep
Yeah.
First for anyone. But why sleep? Because I'm sure it's going to cover pretty much all of those topics. But yeah, when did like sleep become something? Is that because through your research you began to realize the impact and the importance of sleep, and you're like, "Ooh, there's something we need to
Yeah.
do more of here"? Because when I look around, there's not too many sleep experts. I don't know, and yeah, I won't even mention the name, but I've had another sleep expert on my podcast, Olivia. Actually, I will mention that Olivia Arizolo and this guy from America, Devin Burke. But there's not too many of them going around. And
No.
from looking at your background and your research, I feel like you're probably the most accredited person to speak on this. So I'm really grateful to get to have a bit of a chat about sleep. But yeah, why did you land on sleep?
Yeah, so really good question. I hated sleep and thought it was super boring. And anyone from my childhood or anyone from my nightclub days would be like, "Oh my god, you are a sleep reader. That's insane." Like, I literally would not sleep. I'd be the last person standing. I drove my mum crazy. Like, my friends would be like, "Oh, I've got to go to sleep." I'm like, "No, let's stay out." Like, and I would be up. I was super, super non-sleepy person. But then I got glandular fever, and so, I turned into this gonk monster. Like, my friends used to call me tsetse fly. Do you know what a tsetse fly is? That it's a African fly that if it bites you, you just go into a coma and sleep all the time. And so during that, I was forced to sleep, probably caught up on a lifetime of sleep. But I still didn't really I hated it. And so when I got better, I just went back to like my non-sleeping ways. And then I was a stress researcher, so I was looking at all the data and talking to all these people and looking at how do we reduce stress and what are all the factors. And I just kept seeing this, phenomenon that every single person who I saw who had mental health disruption or who was stressed or were not coping, invariably they had a sleep disorder. And on the flip side, every single person who I saw who had a sleep disorder had a mental health disorder or would eventually succumb to some form of mental health disruption. The correlation was so strong. And then I even started noticing myself, when I actually did get some sleep, wow, I've got so much more bandwidth. I feel so much smarter. My memory recall and my speed of processing was so much better. And I was like, okay, this cannot be ignored. So then we started doing sleep research. And I thought what became really interesting for me is people are really bad at, if you say, how did you sleep? They're really bad at having accurate estimation of how well that or bad they slept. And then because of the advent of, these things, Whoop devices, yeah, or
I got
biometric.
an Apple Watch, yeah, but
Yeah,
devices.
so the biometric capture devices meant that we had democratic access to thousands of people at once with really objective data like we've never had before. And because normally you'd have to get people into a sleep lab, and it's super expensive. Who wants to do that? So I was really at the precipice of a really good time in that the science had caught up to the place where we could really know what was going on. And so, I've done lots of those. One of them's I got one published around Wim Hof, and we looked at sleep.
Oh, amazing.
And then another one we're trying to get published at the moment on leaders in sleep. And so a lot of my stuff at the Special Forces, I haven't published or anything. But what we found is oh my God, this is the primary pillar of mental health and wellness. And literally everything then flows on from that. Because if you're sleep deprived, I mean, you don't feel like eating well, you don't feel like exercising, and you don't feel like being nice to people, which is also the other foundations of wellness. And so you've got to start there. That's why it's called Sleep First. And so I was on a panel at South by Southwest, which is for those that don't know, a big conference. And I was on the stage with one of the swimmers who I work with, Shane and Jack, who's actually just retired.
Yeah.
And then the guy who invented 8 Sleep, which is this amazing mattress. So I'll talk about it later. And I was just talking about, sleep. And obviously I'd sounded very passionate, and I had a lot of anecdotes and a lot of information about it. And the woman from Wiley ran up and said, "Oh my God, you've got to write a book." And I'm like, "I've got no time for this." She says, "No, it'll be fine. You can write this book really easy. We'll help you." And so that's how it started. So I didn't go looking to write a book on sleep. I sort of thought, you know what? I've got so much information in my head about it. And I actually wrote a 140,000 word book.
I was
And I
about
cut
to
it in
say.
half, which was so deeply painful.
Well, that's right. It's a different experience to me. Mine, my deal was for 60,000 words, and I think I got to 55,000. I was like, "Is this enough?" And they're like, "Yeah, we can deal with that." Yours is the opposite. Yours got cut in half.
Yeah.
But wow, that's it's such an interesting one, right? Like sleep is something that we all try our best to do. You kind of have to do or you die. What's happening when we sleep? From my, speaking to other people, this idea of our brain basically gets clean. Is it beta amyloid? I might be getting it
Beta
completely
amyloid,
wrong. Beta
alpha.
amyloid, something that
Yeah.
happens. Yeah, I just remember speaking to a guy, this Devin Burke, the sleep guy, and he was talking about, what happens during the night to our brain and why it's so important. Can you explain a little bit about that? And then we'll try and explain to people how they can get a better night's sleep.
Yeah, so I think it got discovered 2012, 13. And I think it's one of the biggest, most impactful pieces of research that's happened in our time. Just knowing that our brains clean themselves during deep, slow wave sleep. So, if people don't know, there's you go from awake through to light sleep. And there's different brain waves, so different patterns.
REM and deep sleep.
Yeah, you go down through. So there's non-REM sleep and then there's REM sleep. So REM sleep's obviously rapid eye movement, the dreaming bit, and non-REM is all the parts of sleep that are not REM. And so up the top, you've got, um, you know, alpha brain waves. When you kind of get sleepy, just that really nice dreamy feeling, and then you go into stage N1, which is theta waves, which is light sleep. And light sleep, and people will often try and use that light sleep or try and wake up in that light sleep so they can get creative insights. So there's a lot of, I don't know, Salvador Dali and inventors, they will deliberately get themselves into that light sleep and then wake up. But so basically what you can do, you can hold a set of keys or a spoon, lie in bed, and then put a metal tray underneath your hand, and then you sort of just go to sleep. And then when you fall asleep, your hand will relax and the keys will clang and it'll wake you up. And then you immediately get a pen and paper and write down the thoughts. And that's the way that you can access your deep consciousness and not be constrained by the laws of physics or the laws of social appropriateness. Because during that light sleep, your adult part of your brain kind of lets go a bit. And so it's a really good way if you need to problem solve or you need to come up with something creative or something different to use that methodology. So then you go all the way down through slowly into deep slow wave sleep. There's a couple of stages. But then when you get down there, I call it's like your body's wellness retreat. And so this is when your 70 to 80% of your growth hormone gets produced, which is really important. You miss that window if you don't have that 2 hours before midnight, which is really important. And also throughout the day, your body will build up the metabolic byproduct of thinking. And this is what you have a little explosion in your brain where your body uses energy. And what's the remnants of what's left over is a product called adenosine. And adenosine is Mother Nature's sleepy potion or dimmer switch. And when that builds up in your brain, it signals to your brain, you need to go to sleep, you should be tired. But this stuff also makes you crazy. Adenosine makes you feel like overwhelmed, like everything's awful is happening in the world. You feel like there's this, impending sense of doom. And people don't realize this, but the only way to get rid of adenosine is to get into deep slow wave sleep. And so what happens is, I know it's a bit sciencey, but stick with me. There's ATP, adenosine triphosphate. That's what then goes down, eventually gets broken down to adenosine. And what happens is there's like this magical alchemy that happens in your brain at night, and it transmutes the adenosine back into ATP. Right, but you need to do that during deep slow wave sleep. So unless you get that, you actually don't replenish the energy source in your brain and get rid of that adenosine. And also, like you mentioned before, there's beta amyloids, there's taus. It's a sticky, plaquey protein that builds up, like the sticky gunk that needs to get flushed out. And during deep sleep, your brain will the cells will squidge back and sort of open up the alleyways, and like a big gurney can come through and go psh, and your brain will produce some like micro squirts of adrenaline, and it's like psh, psh, it's like a bilge pump that just squidges the cerebral spinal fluid and flushes it, and it flushes down here, and you wee it out. And that's super important, because if you don't do that, it's like you've got this really dirty, sticky, tangly mess of streets, and then rats come in, and and it's like thoughts can't work properly, your energy doesn't work. And so if you wake up in the morning and you haven't had deep slow wave sleep, you feel like crap. And then we like to post rationalize, and we think, God, I hate my wife, my dog, my life, my apartment, my job. I hate everything. And you feel depressed and awful. But it could be you're just walking around with a really dirty brain, and you don't even know it. And you think it's everyone else. You think it's you, it's him, it's her. But yeah, so when people say to me, I feel unhinged, I feel awful, I feel out of sorts, I'm like, go and have a good hearty sleep. And measure it. Get a wearable, measure it. So I use the Whoop, which I think is the best, or is good as well. But go and check out, are you getting deep sleep? So once you do that, all the good things happen, blood, brain, regeneration, all your cells get sort of, replenished. And then you come up into REM sleep, which is also equally important, because this is when you file away all of your memories, all the emotional happenings during the day. You've got all these like emotional threads that you haven't sorted out, get sorted out. And I use the analogy of a midnight librarian. And imagine you've got this bench with all of these folders on it. And she's like, oh, look at that memory. That goes in that box. That goes in that box. That I can chuck that one out. That's boring. I don't need that. And then if you don't do that, if you don't have REM sleep, because there's so many things that stop you from having REM, like alcohol, for instance, those memories just get piled up on the desk, and it make you feel anxious the next day. And if you don't have REM sleep, your fear processing gets mucked up. So that means, so I'll give you an example of what fear processing is. So all of us are scared of snakes, right? So if we're walking along, we see something that looks like a snake, we're like, recoil. But then your brain goes over and it logs, no, that was a garden hose. And your brain goes, okay, next time I see something that looks like a garden hose, don't be scared. But if you don't have that REM part of your sleep, your brain doesn't do that properly. And so the next day you walk along, you see a garden hose, you'll get scared of it. But then you'll also get scared of a stick or a shadow that looks like a snake. And so your fear processing kind of gets more global, and you get more anxious about things that you shouldn't be, because you haven't processed the fear correctly. Really important to get REM. So, like anxiety is, dysregulated fear of things.
Yeah, wow. There's so many things that I want to touch on there. But first, I have an Apple Watch. I used to wear a Whoop right when they first started. I was wearing a Whoop, and then I had an Oura Ring for a while. But I've landed on just wearing the Apple Watch now because it kind of covers it all. But I'll give you my update from last night. You can give me a rating on my sleep score from last night. So I had 9 hours and 56 minutes sleep from 8:30 till 6:30.
What? No, wait. Well, Apple are notorious for overestimating sleep, because that if you're not an elite athlete, a toddler, or sick, that's a lot of sleep. I don't think
My
I've
a
had
my
9
my
hours of
average, that was a big night last night. My average is between last week was 8 hours and 40 minutes. This week was 9 hours 15. I'm a big sleeper. Me and my partner are like, we have a rule that at 7 p.m. we have no phones. So once it gets past 7 p.m., and we'll talk about this as well, the environment for sleep, we have no lights in our house that have blue light. So once it gets to after dark, our whole house is chilled. Once it gets
yeah.
to 7, we're not on our phones, on any social media. So usually at 7, we're like in bed by 7:30 at the latest. Where
Wow.
I know it's not great to watch a show, but I can still sleep fine from watching a show. But you saw like from 7:30 till 8:30, we watched a Netflix episode, and then we're asleep at 8:30 and woke up at 6:30 this morning.
Wow, that's
That was a
huge,
big
yeah.
one last night. But then I was just going to break down. So, but this is a thing that I usually don't get that much deep sleep. I had 50 minutes deep sleep, 6.5 hours light sleep, and 2 hours and a half REM sleep, and 15 minutes awake throughout the night.
Yeah, so that I don't know about the accuracy of that thing, and even I can see, it's sitting on your wrist a little bit high, like, get it
It
off
should
the
be down.
bones. Yeah.
Okay.
So I that does not sound accurate to me,
Okay.
but, so you should 50% of your sleep architecture should be made up of REM and slow wave sleep, and so that's it. Yeah, you've got wildly different REM to slow wave sleep, which is concerning. Like,
hmm
that's unusual. Um, like, unless you're so what did you say? You've got lower slow wave and higher REM?
Yeah. So like slow wave was 6 hours, REM's 2.5, and deep's about an hour.
Yeah, so, what we see is when you've had a really kind of cognitively demanding or emotionally demanding day, or if you've had MSG, monosodium glutamate, you have lots more REM. But if you've had a more physically demanding day, or if you've been sick, you have slightly more slow wave sleep. But they should be like 25%, 25%, and just like oscillation from
Yeah, I don't
that.
know. I don't know why it is. Even when I was doing my work, my tracking was like that. Like I just, yeah, my deep sleep. I got to work out what it is, but my deep sleep struggles a little
Alcohol?
bit. Nah, haven't. I don't really drink that much at all. I mean,
Yeah.
every now and then, but I haven't drank this week. But anyway,
Yeah, that's unusual. Yeah, I can see it, like, I don't know if that's accurate because what it might be doing is picking up movement and saying it's REM, but it's not
okay,
really. So, yeah, I think the staging could be a little bit off on that.
that's
But,
fine. But a
yeah.
lot of sleep, yeah. But I'm pretty average, like in bed by 8, and then yeah, up at like 6:30. So yeah.
Wow, that's
I don't have kids yet, but hopefully soon. So I'm just kind of trying to like get up my quota, so then I've got plenty
yeah.
of sleep that I can
They're little
that I can.
sleep thieves that I mean, oh my god. I've got it in the book about what do you do when you're, like, dying and you're a parent and you can't sleep. Yeah.
Can we talk about that? I've got my older sister has got 2 under 2. Actually, my niece just turned 2, but she has one who's 5 months, and then my younger sister has a 6-month-old yesterday.
Oh,
And yeah, my older sister's been struggling a little bit with sleeping with her little one, like every 2 hours every night.
yeah.
Any tips for getting babies sleeping better?
If you look from an evolutionary perspective, humans were never ever meant to be at home alone with a child. Like there was always a tribe where the baby never touched the ground. There was always an auntie or a niece or a cousin or something, always holding a baby. And then the mum would spend like less than 40% of her time alone with a baby back in the hunter gatherer time. So just for a start, what we do is insane. And if you're sleep deprived, exhausted, overwhelmed, like, yeah, of course you are. It's a Molotov cocktail of mental illness, what we expect young mums to do these days. So if you can outsource as much as you can, like pay your way out of it if you can afford it, like give up anything so you can get someone to clean the toilet or you can get someone to help with food or you can get some babysitting because it's much cheaper than a divorce lawyer.
Mhm.
Let me tell you, it is not worth like trying to save money when you've got a little baby because it's only a short amount of time. And in the book, I talk about having a picket. So you act like you're on a military mission that you've got to keep watch for the predators or the danger or for the enemy. And so you have like really, really dole out sleep time and protected relaxing time with your partner as if your life depends on it, and not get like, oh, well, I have to work, or I, only got this many hours sleep. Like, you can't argue about this stuff. And basically, if you've had less than 4 hours of sleep, you do not take anything to heart anyone said, and you don't have arguments. You check each other and go, you're tired, I know you're tired, I'm tired, let's talk about this tomorrow or the next day. Because the type of resentment that builds up during this time period is deep, is bone deep. So you just have to have a very, very strict like military operation regime of, okay, who does the emotional, or the thinking labor. So you're cleaning the toilet and you're cooking. So it's not only doing that job, but working out, is there toilet paper, is there cleaning products, do we have enough butter, do we have like the stuff in the fridge to do the cooking. So all of the thinking that goes into the operation of that task as well, it has to be divvied out. And if you're breastfeeding, like, it's like running a 5 kilometer marathon. Like, the metabolic cost of breastfeeding is huge, and I don't think men realize this. So like, that's why I think parents each should get a Whoop or an Aura, because they're the most accurate. And then you look at who has had the most output, who has had the most sleep, and
That's actually a good way to
and
do it. Do it based on the data. But yeah,
yeah,
my sisters are a bit tricky. My older sister's married to a massive DJ, so they live in Ibiza and travel. He's on the jet all weekend, and she's at home with the 2 kids and the nannies, and just trying to like manage that. And then my younger sister's a bit different of a scenario, and then grandma's kind of flying around the world to try and be there, my mum. But yeah, just interesting to see if there was any tricks and tips. But what you said there, I think, is great for people to not feel guilty about it first and foremost, and just get the help where they can, but then also try their best to understand who has more of a load to be able to carry it each time. Next one, if you walked into an average Aussie bedroom, what's the thing that you see most common, or what are a few of the things from an environment point of view that can help us get a better night's sleep?
I see that people have got, like, of course, TVs and their phones and whatever, and these create these little red or green dots in your peripheral vision. So from an evolutionary perspective, for you to get into deep, slow wave sleep, you need to feel protected and safe. And so we have micro arousals through our 90-minute cycles. And if you wake up and in your peripheral you see red dots, your primitive brain immediately thinks there's like monsters who are going to bite me
Sniper outside.
or sting me, or like a bug or a snake or a whatever. Just animal eyes. And so that will stop you from getting into deep, slow wave sleep. So highly recommend that you turn off or put, blue tack over all dots, particularly if you're traveling in hotel rooms. They're woeful.
I always do that. I wanted to create a product that's like a little black sticker that's for people who travel a lot in hotel rooms to put over your thing. But blue tack's a great idea too. I'm going to start traveling with blue tack.
Yeah. So what I do is I have like 2 or 3 eye masks, and I have them everywhere in my bags when I travel, and even in bed, one under the pillow, one under in my pocket. Because if they fall off and you lose them, you're like, ah. But so the room should be dark, hot, cold, and quiet. So if you hold your hand out in front of your face and you can still see your hand, that your room's not dark enough. So any type of lux will actually hurt your circadian rhythm. And you talked about blue light. There is conjecture about whether a blue light is the real culprit to sleep problems, because we do also have, on the light spectrum, we have purple and green light spectrum, which also do the same thing probably, and it's not affecting that's not getting screened out. So there's I think it was Australian research that came out and said it's actually the lux more so than anything. So you've got to be like, and you're good at this, be really cognizant of how much light is, particularly from above, that's hitting the bottom of your retinal cells, how much artificial light is getting into your eyeballs. And I always say, do not sleep with Alan. Alan is bad for you. So Alan is artificial light at night. So don't let Alan in your bedroom. And so what you should do is, if you have light exposure at night, it will push your melatonin, your sleeping hormone production, back 1 to 2 hours. And what we've found, though, it's predicated on how old you are and the color of your eyes. So if you've got blue eyes and you're younger, artificial light really pushes back your melatonin production. If you've got darker eyes or if you're older, you're a little bit more protected. But what you've got to do, there's a new study, you've got to get daylight in your eyeballs, and somehow it's protective. So even if you do have artificial light at night, the more sunlight you get during the day, the less effect it has on your melatonin production later. So they got people in the office, people who went outside, people who didn't. Then they had the same amount of artificial light at night, and then they looked at how long it took them to get to sleep because of melatonin. And the guys that had sunlight during the day did much better. But also there's things that are like volatile compounds coming out of your carpets or furniture. If you're using really highly scented washing powders, are terrible for you. Candles, they're terrible. They've got endocrine disrupting chemicals in them, it's particularly bad for males.
Polyester sheets.
Yeah, plastic sheets. Even if you've got moisturizers that are full of fragrances, you're putting it straight on your skin. Particularly for men, you should not be like, I'm seeing people put deodorant on before they go to bed. Like, just try and be chemical free when you're in your bed. There's also that people don't change their sheets enough. So, like, if you got a microscope and looked at your sheets, you would be utterly horrified. It's a zoo in there. So you've got all of these dust mites, you've got, shedding skin, you've got, like, dust is a massive thing. So, if you've got an old pillow that you could, like, what it does, it gives you slight inflammation in your airways, and then you snore and then you wake up. So there's lots of things that, you should be wearing natural fiber pajamas. So if you can, cotton, or if you can, silk or flax. So you breathe naturally.
Bamboo.
You should be cold when you're asleep.
What about naked? Naked best?
Yeah. But some people, definitely for guys, so you can keep your testicles cooler, because that's where most of your production of your testosterone is. They like to be cool. But there is some women who maybe have had some form of sexual assault who really can't sleep naked, and they need to have clothes on them. And there's even some women who I've spoken to said, growing up as a child, I was always scared that someone was going to come into my room. I've had experience of this, or I had to protect my younger siblings. So I'm like, get a cocoon, like cocoon your bedroom, get a really nice natural fiber mosquito net to make this like a little sanctuary that you feel really safe and really cloistered in, and like, just it's your secret special space that no one else comes in. So that sleep anxiety around that, there's a lot of people have got that sleep anxiety because you're unprotected.
Yeah. No, I feel you there. It's I had a person talking. I've had a few people actually recently speaking about sexual assault and domestic violence and the screwed legal system that we have here. So yeah, it's really interesting to get that point. Two things while we're sleeping that I've done over the years that I've found really beneficial is grounding sheets and pillow, and also mouth taping to promote nasal breathing, because obviously there's so many benefits to nasal breathing, and to have that whole chunk of your sleep breathing through your nose. What's your take on those two? Mouth taping / nasal breathing at night, and grounding sheets. What's your thoughts on the science of grounding?
Yeah, I'm really careful about saying yes and no, you should or you shouldn't do this, because I think you've got to engage in many experiments for your own
Exactly what
physiology.
works for you.
Yeah, and if you feel it works, 100% keep it up. So there is, as you know, a lot of evidence for mouth taping, because inside your paranasal sinuses we have enzymes that produce nitric oxide, and that is produced only when you breathe through your nose. Nitric oxide is an extra carbonative effect. It's a vasodilating. It makes you feel, drops your blood pressure. It also has antimicrobial effect, and we also know that if you hum, it increases your nitric oxide by 15 times. So,
wow.
yeah, so definitely try and breathe through your nose. You've got little cilia hairs that will collect dust, mite, or whatever. But what happens is people are often eating foods that create slight inflammation. So if you think about what a Western diet is, it's full of products that, from an ancient hunter-gatherer perspective, would see as poisons or teratogens or things that are really bad for you, because they're chemical laden, and our body just sees chemicals as poison. And so you get this slight inflammation from eating anything that's got, I don't know, metabisulfates, it's got fake sugars or fake colouring, or
Seed oils and
Yeah, any of those things. And so we get the slight inflammation, you get inflammation in your airways. And so taping your mouth might make people feel, I don't know, anxious because their nose gets blocked up when they lie down and go to bed. So yeah, do an experiment on yourself. On the grounding sheets, I do talk about this in the book. There was a study done on it, very small sample set, and I believe that they couldn't determine that if it was an effective or not. But I'm a strong believer. If you believe it's good for you, do it. I mean, you can go out and go barefoot in grass as well. I think that's a really good thing to do if you can't afford grounding sheets.
For sure, yeah. I think obviously just getting outside and letting that electromagnetic energy out of your field as much as possible is great. But if you can sleep grounded, I've found it really beneficial. It's just nice to quickly touch on that with you. I'm not going to keep you for too much longer. I've got so many things I want to chat to you about, but I want to talk to you about food now because the food and the drinks that we have affects our sleep. Having coffee in the day. When should we stop drinking coffee? Obviously, alcohol is terrible for our sleep. But also what you touched on there with any food that is pro-inflammation, it affects our breathing. I've never really thought of it like that as well. So yeah, what are some foods that we should look to avoid if we want to sleep
Yep.
well? And then maybe like how long, because as well, that's another thing that I've spoken to other sleep experts about, how long before we go to bed we should stop eating so our body can digest rather than trying to digest while it's trying to sleep.
Yeah, these are excellent questions. I've got a huge part in the book around chrono diet
Mm-hmm.
and what you should and shouldn't eat. So just to go back to the caffeine's great. Like there's a strong correlation between caffeine and living longer and healthy heart. And I actually think there's a social dimension to it, like because it's a ritual and you go and say, hey, buy your coffee and you sit together and chat. So I think coffee is really, really good. And I think what people don't understand is that coffee doesn't give you energy. It blocks the sleepy signal. So I spoke about before adenosine.
Yeah.
So people go, I need coffee to wake me up. I'm like, no, it doesn't give you anything. It just stops the underlying sleepy feeling. So caffeine will sit on the adenosine receptors. And so when the caffeine wears off, you feel even more crap. So a rule of thumb is when you wake up and get your first photon exposure into your eyeballs, your first light into your eyeballs, count 16 hours into the future. That is when you get your natural sleep pressure, right? This is like an express bus to deep sleep. It's your bus. It's got your name on it. You get on that bus. But if you miss that bus, another bus might come along, but it'll be like a shabby, dirty, slow bus. You might not get you to slow wave sleep. So there's a window at 16 hours of natural sleep pressure. Often we're on the couch and we go, and watch Netflix and then you get it, not you, but a lot of other people, and you get a second wind and you get adrenaline and cortisol. So coming back to caffeine. So that 16 hours is where you've got to be ready to go to bed. Now, get that number and minus 6 hours. So caffeine has got on average a 6-hour half-life. If you're a little bit more sensitive to caffeine, go back 7 or 8 hours. You'll know, if you have a coffee and you feel a bit shaky, you're probably quite susceptible to it. And so it's a very genetic component. 50% of us are like fast metabolisers. 50% of us are like more prone to anxiety with caffeine, and we're slow metabolizers. If you're pregnant, on a pill, have liver damage, these will all slow down your ability to metabolize. So, okay, so 16 minus 6 is your last caffeine. So this is all sorts of caffeine sources. So teas, energy drinks, caffeine, even chocolate has got it in it. Now, people will say, oh, I can have 5 cups of coffee and I'm fine. I sleep like a baby. And I'm like, what? Wake up every 2 hours crying. So it's, and now we know that's bullshit because we can see on biometric capture devices that people have very low awareness. There's a perception gap between their sleep and what they think happened. So we have micro arousals all throughout the night. And people are waking up because their adenosine receptors are blocked by caffeine, but they just don't notice it. But their physiology does notice it. So it's not true. Caffeine does affect you. You might be a fast metabolizer, but I tell you, if you're having 5 cups of coffee before bed, your sleep will be crap and you're not feeling as good as you could feel. So there are some other things that really affect your sleep. So alcohol is absolutely terrible. So if you can, day drink. Push it back. And your question is like, what are you eating before bed and how long before bed should you stop eating? So my PhD student did a study and she looked at time-restricted eating, and she found that if you have your last meal when the sun goes down, all of your metrics improve, like your heart rate variability, your resting heart rate, respiration rate, sleep consistency, sleep onset, all these things do really well if you eat your last meal when the sun goes down. In fact, she found 3 p.m. was the best. And I'm like, who is going to do that? Not me. Anyway, so if you can, try to have vegetarian at night. So if you've got a big chunk of, decomposing flesh in your stomach at night because you've had a big steak, your body will prioritize deep, slow waves. It will prioritize digesting over deep, slow wave sleep.
Yeah.
So you really see it in the data. Your bodies, they compete with each other. So if you have protein at lunch and vegetarian at night, hugely beneficial. And in fact, you should be eating a Mediterranean diet if you have any sleep issues. So Mediterranean diet is, we know is like lots of olive oils, vegetables, small amount of meat, legumes, like just leafy greens, a bit of fruit. And that is really, really good for sleep because what it does, it creates short chain fatty acids, and these things help something called butyrate, which is really important for the health of your stomach. So in between your stomach cells, the lining, you've got these tight junctions, and it's the mucus across, and that really helps replenish that mucus, which stops bits of food particles getting into your bloodstream. So if your stomach you've had lots of alcohol, or you've had antibiotics, or if you've had crap food, you might have loose junctions and bits of food can get in and it sets off your inflammation system. And it's kind of like, imagine if you've got a fire detector in your home and sometimes they go chirp, chirp because the battery's running low.
Oh.
It's not enough for you to go crap and like run out of the building, but it kind of just like sets you like, choo, choo. They got this kind of thing that sets you off. That's what like a bad diet does. It's not enough to launch a full immune response, but it just has this chirping, which is a real drain on your system, and it creates inflammation, and inflammation really affects your sleep. If you eat a Mediterranean diet, particularly foods with tryptophan in it, so tryptophan is a precursor to melatonin, the sleep hormone. So if you eat foods 4 to 6 hours before you sleep, that will improve your sleep significantly. So tart cherry juice, kiwi fruits, walnut seeds, cottage cheese. So these are some things, turkey, not too much turkey. These are some things you can eat to improve your sleep later. But anything with phenylalanine and taurine, which is energy drinks, are terrible for sleeping.
Yeah, wow, I bet. I feel like we've all felt that. I mean, I've had nights out where I've drunk somehow many vodka Red Bulls, and it's just like,
bad.
oh my God, there's no way I'm
Up
sleeping.
and down at the same time. It's like, yeah. Another thing I think people don't realize, and some people are more susceptible than others, is MSG, monosodium glutamate.
Mm,
So have you ever gone out, like it's in Chinese food, all takeaway food and packaged food. You got to look for the numbers, 621.
yeah.
If you have it, you like feel really sleepy and then you go to bed and you have crazy and then you wake up feeling like really, I don't know, strung out and like tired and thirsty. So
Yeah.
MSG is terrible for sleep.
What I do psychologically when I've got heaps of stuff on and I can't stop thinking, I'm like, my best chance of solving any of these problems that I'm trying to solve in my head right now is to solve them tomorrow after a good night's sleep, not after lying in bed, not thinking. So I go, okay, I've like learned how to compartmentalize and just be like, oh, well, there's no point in thinking about it now because I can solve it better tomorrow I'll solve it better tomorrow if I've had a better night's sleep. So I'll just park it and then come back to it, which I know a lot of people can't do.
That's so disciplined though.
I mean, it doesn't happen every time because sometimes it takes me a while to catch myself and go, wait a second, why am I wasting my brain power thinking now when I'll solve this better tomorrow when I've slept better tonight? If someone struggles with ruminating thoughts, what's a tip for them?
Our ancestors probably had a first sleep and a second sleep. So we've got this, ancient biological remnant of where we used to wake up. And so, adults would, I don't know, talk or, tend to the fire or knit or whittle sticks or have sex or, journal, whatever. And then we'd have a second sleep. So I think the fact that we've crunched our sleep into like this, 8-hour block because we've got to go to work, we've got to go into the city or work in a factory, right? So we're, hunter gatherers, they do this, or even earlier populations. So the first is like once you wake up, don't feel like, oh my God, I'm alone in the world, this is terrible. The more you stress about it, the more you produce a stress hormone. So I think what people have got to understand, your thoughts become chemicals, and these chemicals are kryptonite to sleep. And so if you can feel yourself like, oh my God, I've got to stop those little bubbles of cortisol coming out, and I know the thoughts are doing it, you get much more aware and much more cognizant of the impact of your thoughts. They're not these ephemeral things that go off into the ether and mean nothing. They have serious biochemicals, second, third order effects. And so what I do is, you've got to understand that at 2 or 3 a.m. when people are waking up, this is when REM starts, and this is when the midnight librarian starts gearing up. And so if you've got unfinished emotional threads that you've gone to sleep with before you sorted them out, you've never, like, you think about what we do during the day. We never, ever are silent. We never stop. We've always got a phone in our face. When you think our ancestors would spend time just sitting there beside a river, or they'd be like, you know, they'd be knitting, or they'd be fishing, or they'd have time for their brain to process emotional thoughts. We never, ever give our brains that time. So they're like, sweet, 3 a.m. is it. I've got a chance now, and you're going to think about this emotional thing. The midnight librarian's going to wake you up and say, hey, I can't sort this on my own. I need executive orders from you. You're going to wake up and you're going to look at this folder. And so if you wake up and you're like, and it can be excitement stuff too. It's not always this bad stuff. I get excited. I think about doing this and that.
Yeah.
And you produce cortisol. Cortisol's got a 30-minute half-life. Right. So when that gets secreted and you're still awake, going, go to sleep. And you're like, I've got to get up. And you produce more cortisol. So there's another half an hour before you can go to sleep. So you've got to be really disciplined about what you let run around in your head when you're lying there trying to go back to sleep. But like you said, you're super disciplined, which is amazing. But
Doesn't happen every night, don't worry. It's
yeah,
just like when it does happen, I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm taking
yeah,
control here. Or I just come back to my breathing, being a breathwork coach and facilitator, and understanding
yeah,
that if we breathe out for longer than we breathe in, we're going to signal to our nervous system, hey, you can
regulate.
come from that fight or flight back down to that rest and digest where we want to be. So I just come back to my breath if I can't, really just step away from it and fall straight back to sleep.
So many people have got such a grip, a monkey mind, just as like their thoughts are thinking themselves. And particularly if you say, you don't think about that thing, don't think about that thing, your brain goes,
Think
what?
about it.
You don't want to think about that thing. And it's like turbo thinking about it. And you're like, and you're like, who's running the show up there? Like, seriously, this is outrageous. So if for people who've got monkey mind, I always talk about having a safe basket of thoughts. So these are non-emotionally evoking, relatively like, I don't know, technical, but they're things that will stop the ping pong in your head.
Mm.
And they're things that, it could be imagining making your most favorite meal, or your run, or your yoga asanas, or changing a bike tire, or just something that's like low emotionally evoking stuff. Or my favorite is, if you think of a word like slumber, then you pick of all the non-related words starting with S. So sugar, serene, slumber, situation, salt, silver. And then you picture them slowly. And then when you can't think of any more S's, you go to the L, then the U. And I've literally never gotten to R. Like, I've just gone
Mm.
like that. But sometimes when you're really, really activated, like something's really pissed you off, or you're super excited, I think, like, you look at up from energetic valence. So you can't go from up here and go down here to sleep. Like, the distance between the energies is too great. So what you've got to do is you've got to step down. So then I think of, imagine if I won $50 million, like, who would I secretly help? Because that's kind of still exciting. I think about, I'd just like ring up their banks and I'd pay off their mortgage, or I'd just buy them plane tickets and then send it in the mail, and I wouldn't let them know it's me. So it's kind of like very engaging, but still high energy. And then you can slowly, like, okay, now I feel a little bit more down regulated. I can go into cognitive shuffling, which is
Mm.
that thing I spoke about. So it's all about, when you keep, number one premise, don't produce adrenaline or cortisol. And then you can just feel your way around thoughts. You go, that's making me feel activated. That's making me feel downregulated. And then, yeah. And so I
Don't
use,
grab for your phone.
yeah, do not look at your phone. If you have to look at your phone, look at it on the side. I don't know if you can see this. You don't look at it straight into your eyeballs.
Okay.
And do not look at your phone. And then I use something I talk about in the book, is called the welcome practice. So you welcome this moment when the world's quiet, and no one's pestering you. It's just silence, and you can just do it, journaling, and you're like, yeah, this time's really good. So you're not producing stress hormones. And then we find that if you do that, the time that you're awake shortens.
Mm. Wow. So much good stuff to go off. And hopefully we can line up another chat maybe in 6 to 12 months, because I have so many more questions that we didn't get a chance to get to today, but I really want to respect your time. I know you're not feeling well as well. So I'm gonna call it there. But I wanted to talk to you about sleep supplements, the impact of melatonin, of different sleeping
Yeah.
aids. You're working with Olympians, working with the army. Like, there's so much that we could talk about. But I'm going to read your book, and then maybe we can try and book in for another 6 to 12 months and have a catch up about a few
Yes.
more things that are in your book. Because yeah, it truly fascinates me, all of the work that you do and how we can help people improve their life through sleep, through understanding human behavior, understanding our physiology better. So thank you so much for giving up your time today. I do finish Good Humans podcast with the same question for everyone. So what does being a good human mean to Dr. Jemma King?
Um, I think this is so important now more than ever, is to be of service makes you sane. I think so many people have like this whole wellness bro movement, this whole like introspective movement where like I, my supplements, my this, my that. Like, it's boring and it makes
Mm,
you unhappy. Like, we know it makes you unhappy when you just think about yourself all the time and about how you can optimize yourself. I honestly think be of service to others, because what it does, it tricks your brain into thinking that you've got more resources. So if you're down in the dumps and you feel like absolutely like have got nothing, find someone and help them and be kind and gracious. And that tricks your brain into thinking, well, I actually do have resources that I didn't know I had. But yeah, I think we are collective we're a collective society, and we just forget that it actually makes you better. It makes you healthier. It makes you happier if you actually are of service to your community, to your family, your friends, and, more broadly, the world. So
mm.
that's what I think is being good human.
I love that. I think it's very beautifully put. It's very much like I talked about, this idea of you climb the mountain of self-achievement and realize actually the service mountain is the one where you're going to reach fulfillment and, have that fulfillment constantly throughout your life, not just, oh, I just did one nice thing, I'll focus on myself now. So thanks for wrapping it up like that. This has been an absolute incredible chat. I'll leave in the show notes a link to go and grab Dr. Gemma's book, Sleep First. I'll also leave a link to her website if you're looking for an incredible keynote speaker in your business, your corporate, your conference. Book me and then book Gemma. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Please book Dr. Gemma, because I can't wait to watch you do a keynote one day. I'm so fascinated by the world of keynote speakers and how you can use a little bit of time to shift people's lives. And the stages that you get on are incredible. So I can't wait to watch you speak one day. And like I said, any of my audience who want somebody like that to come and teach people how to live a better life and live a more fulfilled life and a more engaged life, then make sure you go check out all the info on Dr. Gemma. So anything else you want to say, or thanks so much
I
for
just wanna
jumping
say
on?
congratulations to you. What an incredible journey you've been on, and I love the 14%. That's, really, it's genius.
The 1%, 14 minutes.
Yeah.
What you got the 14
I
right.
love your 14 minutes.
Nah, well, thank you so much. I'm sure people have got so much out of this episode. If you did enjoy it and you're listening right now and you've made it to the end, make sure you hit like or subscribe. Go follow Dr. Gemma, what she's up to, and make sure you leave us a little review or give us a 5-star rating. So thank you so much, Dr. Jemma King, for jumping on Good Humans podcast.